Hi, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. I'm going to give it a few minutes for people to arrive, so we won't start for another couple of minutes. But feel free to say hello in the chat. I see some new names I don't recognize. Super exciting. Hey, Lily. I know you. Good to see you. It's right at noon. I'm going to give it about 2 more minutes just to get as many people in here as possible. So just say hi in the chat if you want. And we'll start in just a couple minutes. All right, we're getting a good group now, so I'm going to start in just a sec. Yes, this is being recorded, so we can send it back to you guys when that's done. So what we're going to do at first is I am going to go through a very quick slideshow, just going over the panel submission process, answering some questions that we're already getting. So hopefully answering some questions that maybe you guys have. And then we'll open it up for questions. You can ask questions about the conference in general. You can ask questions about the panel submission process, or if you want to throw out an idea that you're mulling and that you're considering submitting, then I'm happy to hear those and then give you feedback and thoughts on that too. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Hi, so good to see lots of new names. I'm going to share my screen now, and then just give me 1 second to pull up the slides, and I'll start going through those. If you have questions as I'm going through the slides, I'm going to try to go through them quickly so that we have most of the time for Q&A. So maybe just open a notes thing, or if you have paper nearby, throw some questions onto that, and then we can get to questions as soon as the slides are done. All right. Okay, you should see my slides. Let me know if you do not. I can't tell. All right, 1 second. All right, so let me just get these full screen. All right. So welcome to our quick Q&A session for panel submissions. Hopefully you know by now that Netroots is going to be happening in the fall, which is an odd time for us. But we just wanted to make it as accessible for as many people as possible, knowing that people still have to get vaccinations and folks are still kind of recovering mentally, financially, etc. So we'll be having the event in a hybrid format. So what that will look like is half of our breakout sessions will be happening in DC, that will be streamed and recorded into our app. It's the same app we used last year if you attended last year. And then the other half of the breakout sessions will happen virtually, kind of as a webinar. It'll appear as a webinar, and then those will be saved into our app as well. So, you know, we've got about half the capacity for in-person events as we typically do, just because we weren't sure how many people would be comfortable, you know, attending in person. And so folks will be engaging in the room and also from their homes or their workplaces throughout the weekend. We want to be very clear that this is not two separate events. It's one conference with two ways to attend. So if you can't be there in person, you're not relegated to some lesser events. We're going to be doing all that we can to make sure that people who are there live are also seeing questions coming in from the app. You'll be able to access all of the same content that's happening, you know, on site. And so know that if you're not able to attend in person, it's totally fine. You'll still be, you know, able to access and participate in the content. My contact information is on this slide. Feel free to jot it down if you have questions that you want to follow up with me later. The panel submission process or period ends next week, July 2nd. So you've got about a week and a half still to get your ideas in. Once that submission period closes, we have a very fast turnaround for getting all of these great submissions scored and selected. My hope is that by mid-August, August 15th, at the latest, we'll be able to announce them. Hopefully we can announce them, you know, even a week or so earlier, so that, you know, when we have panel submissions, we typically get 300 or 400 submissions. We break them up into committees. We have folks who are leaders in the community, and members of the community help score them. If you're interested in being one of those people who wants to score, grab my email and just shoot me an email with your name, and that you're interested in being on a scoring committee, and we'll get you plugged in. So we'll do an initial round of selections by committee. The top scoring panels will go to a final committee that's made up of some other, some community members, as well as our two board of directors, to make those final selections. And then, as I said, we'll be announcing those by August. So if you have not looked yet at the submission forum, you'll be able to submit two types of sessions, panels or trainings, and then you'll be asked to indicate whether or not you're submitting for in-person consideration or virtual consideration. So I do want to clarify, if you're planning to attend in DC in person, but some of your panelists cannot, then that would be a virtual panel. So if you're submitting for in-person, that means that you and all of your co-presenters will be on site. And if it's virtual, then that means that everyone will be doing their panel from their hotel room if they happen to be in DC, their office if they're working at home, or their home. And so if you plan on being there in person, and your panel is going to be virtual, that's totally fine. You can do it from a quiet space in the convention or in the hotel, from your hotel room, whatever. But just know that as far as how it's presented, they either need to be fully in person or fully virtual. So if you've never submitted panels before, just a quick note, our panels, we try to make them as intersectional as possible. We like them to be cross-issue focused if possible, action-oriented. We want people to know, if the panel happens to be about climate organizing, we want people who are maybe working on reproductive access to be able to say, oh, that's an interesting approach to how they did this organizing. I can apply that to my work. And so as much as possible, we like for people to be able to have takeaways from the panels. And then diverse. It's very important to us that we don't have panels that are all white dudes. And so it's a requirement. Actually, if you submit a panel that's all white men, it will not be considered. So we do want to make sure that our panels are diverse. by gender, by type of work that folks do. We don't want to see panels where it's 4 people from the same organization, because that's not generally how our work goes. You know, you from an organization, you typically work with other organizers in other organizations or cross sector. And so we want to have these conversations be as diverse viewpoint, ethnicity, race, or gender, all of those things as possible. And panels, I should say, are moderator plus up to 4 panelists. We don't generally have panels that have more than 5 people total on stage. And so keep that in mind. You don't have to have 4 panelists. You can have a moderator and 2 panelists. That's fine. But 4 is the max. And then trainings, we typically limit those to 1 or 2 presenters. We found in our years of experience that generally when it's just 1 or 2 presenters, it's just a cleaner skills-based presentation. And so just keep that in mind. The main differentiation is that panels are generally discussions, conversations. They can be case studies or digging into an issue or exploring a topic or an approach. Trainings are skills focused. And so we want people to really come away from a particular training saying, wow, I learned this skill. I learned how to, get better ROI on my email program. I learned how to speak to the press in a more concise, polished manner. And so just keep that in mind if you are submitting something that is a training, that it needs to have a concrete takeaway from it. Topically, if you're submitting a panel, you can submit on any topic. If you've been before, you know that our panels cover just about every issue on the progressive spectrum, but we generally have a few themes that we like to try to thread as much as possible. So this year we're specifically looking to find content on 2020, lessons learned, what worked, what didn't work, how can we apply those lessons to future cycles, related to that, how do we pass progressive legislation? It's not enough to just win an election. We have to be able to convert that into change. And so how do we pass legislation? How do we govern? How do we hold our elected officials accountable? So those 2 pockets. And then a little more specifically, COVID recovery. In talking to folks, we're finding that a lot of people are wanting to dig into conversations around, how do we recover from the economic craziness of the past year? How do we get back to normal when it comes to thinking about our society and our economy? And that's something that we really want to try to shift away from, is talking about returning to normal, because I think most of us agree that normal didn't work. Normal exploited our workers and, exhausted our families and, just kept people in oppression. And so one thing that we're really encouraging folks is that if you're submitting a panel on, economic policy or immigration or whatever, to not just think about what's right in front of us politically, but what is our big solution? Like, what big ideas do we want to see in the narrative shift over the next decade? And so keep that in mind if you're thinking about sort of something that relates to, getting back to normal. And then the final sort of big bucket is just protecting our democracy. So all the voter protection stuff, beating back all of these GOP bills, statehood, courts, anything that kind of falls into that bucket is something that we're hoping to highlight too. If you're submitting a training, just keep in mind that we have brand new activists, folks who really are just getting into organizing or digital organizing. We have folks who are very professional, who've been doing this for decades. And so we want to offer trainings that appeal to both of those groups of people. And then we also want to have content that works. If you work at MoveOn or the Sierra Club or an organization that has a large staff and a large email list or a large membership, but we also want the trainings to be relevant to folks who work at small community nonprofits who maybe are just starting out, building an online following or building an email list and that sort of thing, and people who have no budget. And so just keep that in mind. We also do have some campaigns that are more about community organizing, field type work, communications, campaigning, and that sort of thing. So just really quickly, how to submit. If you have not been to our website yet, netrootsnation.org, at the top in our menu, you'll see a session proposal link. If you click that, it's all the information that you'll need, the timelines, the link to actually submit it, and then some FAQ that we find pops up from year to year. This is one of the panel submission forms, just to show you. You'll be asked to check that you understand sort of what's expected of you if you do get chosen. You'll be asked to put in your contact information just as a presenter, whether or not you're just organizing a session or you're participating as a speaker. And then kind of the next phase of the panel submission form is talking about your panel. We recommend keeping your title brief and descriptive. Sometimes people get really witty, which is awesome, but that doesn't always reflect what the session's about. The panel will be public facing eventually, so just think about that. We use these, when we publish the chosen sessions on the website. You'll be asked why we should choose the panel and what the takeaways are. And then when you're putting in your information for the moderator, the panelists, and your trainers, we do ask some demographics questions. The reason we ask those is because we want to track our progress at how diverse our speakers are. And so we don't ever share that information. Your personal information, that's all confidential. We just use it internally to sort of measure and make sure that the speakers that we're putting on the stage reflect what our community looks like. And so that's why we ask those questions. Here's the panel submission or the training submission form. When you fill that out, you'll be asked for a category if you're not sure, or maybe it fits into 2 categories. You can actually pick up to 2. Just take your best guess. If it ends up being wildly miscategorized, we can correct that. But just put what you think. And then one of the questions I do want to point out is describe the skill level of the training. And so it could be as simple as, this is a beginner training that's appropriate for people who know nothing about this, or if you're doing a website tech type training, being able to say this training is best suited for someone who has some basic coding knowledge or something like that. But that helps us to know whether it's beginner or advanced, because one thing that we found is that people, if they go into a session assuming that it's advanced and it's very beginner, they get frustrated, and vice versa. And so we want to try to communicate that as clearly as possible for folks. So when it comes to selecting submissions, like I mentioned earlier, we break these down from 300 or 400 to about 100, and then in multiple different committee phases. Just a few things just to reiterate. Diversity of speaker is super important. Topics that cross silos, as I mentioned earlier. Things to avoid, as I mentioned, having monolithic panelists, meaning all 5 of my panelists are for the same organization. AstroTurfing, like we generally don't select panels or trainings that are very, promotional of your software or your something that is, that you're selling. Our attendees get really frustrated, especially with trainings, if they go in and feel like they're just being pitched. So we want our trainings in particular to be applicable whether or not you can afford to purchase a particular software or not. Fantasy speakers, just occasionally we'll get a submission where someone will list Michelle Obama or someone like that as a speaker. And so we want to just make sure you will be asked if you have approached this person, if you have a way to get to this person, if you're connected to loosely and hoping you can get Stacey Abrams, that's amazing. But like if you submit Stacey and Michelle Obama and Ayanna Pressley and, all really high profile people, then, just know that that's that's much harder to coordinate schedule wise, and typically more of a keynote. So so just avoid those things. And then just a few more tips: submit early if possible. If you're able to get it in this week, that just helps us gauge kind of topically what's coming in. Give your panel a simple, straightforward title so that people know what your session is about, and then complete the form as much as you're able. Sessions are 60 minutes long. We'll have 9 breakout slots over 3 days. If your session gets chosen, you will be asked to choose, let us know when you're not available. So if you absolutely can't attend on Saturday, it's totally fine. You'll get a chance to be able to say, say that you can only do Thursday or Friday. And then just to reiterate, if your panel is selected, your work is not done. It's your responsibility to confirm your speakers. If there's someone that you're not super connected to, then sometimes we can make that connection. Or often if someone submits a panel with just 2 panelists, then we might suggest, hey, have you considered, adding a person from this community or from this organization? Because sometimes we are trying to connect people that maybe submitted similar panel ideas. And so in those instances, we can help you. But once panels are selected, you'll be asked to, make sure that if you're the panel organizer, that your panelists understand what time their session is at, what any tech logistics, especially if it's happening virtually, et cetera. Like I said, you don't have to have hard speaker confirmations. It's just helpful to know if your panelists, proposed panelists, have been approached yet. Lots of people are wanting to know about a cost to register. We generally do ask for folks who can afford it to pay for the registrations, because we do have a lot of hard costs in putting on the conference, and we have 400 or so speakers each year. But just know that we don't ever want ticket price to be a barrier for folks. We have reduced rates, we have waivers that are available, and we're happy to help you out if you're from an organization that's struggling financially, or if you're an individual who needs a little help. Just know that that's available for you. And then if you have an idea that's outside the box of what a panel or training is, and you want to propose it, just shoot us an email at panels@netrootsnation.org, or my email, mary@netrootsnation.org. We're happy to consider other ideas for creative programming, and usually have a few things that pop up from year to year. So I'm going to stop screen sharing now. Bear with me one second. I have far too many windows open. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to get into questions. I see a couple of folks have already put questions into the chat. So the first person says, given that we are recording, assuming we can expect a link for review of, oh yeah, yes, I will, we'll send the link around to everyone who RSVP'd. Someone is wanting to know if the max for panels is 4 panelists plus, yes, it's 4 panelists plus a moderator. So 5 people total would be the max for that. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat or in the Q&A box. You can also raise your hand, and we can do that. Mira, no, we're not voting on sessions this time. We usually, if you have not been to Netroots, we typically do a public vote period where we let folks kind of weigh in. And we're not doing that this year just because we have such a compressed timeline of planning this year. So we are not doing the public voting. So we will go, once that panel submission closes, we'll go straight into dividing the sessions into committees and getting them scored. Christina is asking if you can submit a panel and a training, and absolutely. You can submit, sometimes we have had people submit 10 ideas. That does not mean you'll get 10 sessions chosen. But you can absolutely submit multiple sessions if you would like to. Will, correct. There's no need for you to campaign or promote your session. We're just, we had to compress the timeline in how we score these, so we will not be doing that at all. David wants to know about caucuses. That's one thing that's still up in the air. Because we are staffing basically 2 types of events, we're having to staff virtual and in person and do logistics for both. We're really having to kind of dial down to make sure that we're doing our panels, our trainings, and our keynotes really well. So things like caucuses and screenings, we're still kind of debating on how we should do those. It's possible we might do caucuses after the October 7th through 9th window. We may do those virtually, just different. But right now we're not planning on doing caucuses in person at the moment. So if we decide to change that, we will send an email out letting people know, and then giving people a chance to submit an idea for a caucus. Someone is asking, is there an extra cost for being a panelist? I'm not sure what you mean by extra. Like, as a panelist, that doesn't guarantee you'll get a free ticket. If that's what you're asking? We generally say if you're with an organization that has a budget, we have a lot of hard costs, especially this year, in doing in-person logistics and an app. And staffing both of those, that if your organization is able to pay for you to be there, especially if you're going to be attending the whole rest of the conference, then we do ask that people, people pay their way. But as I said earlier, we don't want cost to ever be, a barrier for someone speaking in particular, or being a trainer. And so if you need to ask for a waiver, once panels are selected, we will email all the panel organizers and tell them, hey, if any of your panelists or co-speakers or yourself needs to request a waiver, here's how you do it. Walter, are digital panels pre-recorded or live? So here's, at any given time, so suppose the time slot for a panel is 1 p.m., 1 to 2 p.m. And then what that's going to look like as an attendee is that probably six sessions will be happening in DC and live streamed into our app. And then 6 sessions will be happening virtually. So that means live, like at the same time, people at 1 p.m. Eastern, people will get onto their Zoom, get into our app, and it will look like a webinar, and people will be able to watch it as it's happening. If you attended last year, it's just like that last year. And then everything will be recorded into the app and saved. So if you're in DC and watching everything virtually, you can either go to a room and watch a session, or if you want to watch a session that's happening virtually, then great. We're going to have some public spaces where folks who are maybe 10 people, 10 of your friends want to watch the same panel that's happening virtually. Like, we want to encourage people to watch these together and that sort of thing. So we're going to have some public spaces as much as we have, capacity for folks to watch the virtual sessions as they're happening. And then we also, we don't want people who are watching virtually to feel like they're, at a second tier event or anything like that. So we're going to be in each of the live panel rooms, we will have a volunteer dedicated to watching the live chat and comments, and feeding those questions and comments up to the moderator or the trainer so that they can be participating in what's happening as well. And so we're trying to integrate that as much as possible. So yeah, just know that, we're trying to create the experience as integrated as possible for everyone, no matter how they're participating. Allie, yes, panels can include slides and supporting materials. If you're presenting live, there will be screens in the room. If you're presenting virtually, then we'll do a test run through with all of the virtual panelists where you can figure out, we generally recommend that one person be sort of the manager of any slides or graphics that are happening and use their screen share for that. So yeah, absolutely. We encourage actually for people to use slides and graphics because it helps folks retain that information, I think, better. Any other questions? Is there any issue with including political topics? No, not at all. Netroots is a C3. We have a C3 and a C4. We have panels that are very nonpartisan. We have panels that are extremely partisan, and it's really just a matter of, if your organization is paying your way, are they okay with you being recorded saying something that's very political? That's really an issue that each panelist or speaker just has to answer for themselves. But as far as submitting, it can be nonpartisan or it can be very partisan. Totally no boundaries there. Walter's asking, why are there 3 price levels for the virtual access? We did that kind of as a sliding scale. It's the same access, but some people have the budget to pay the higher end, and some people don't. The lower end, we have a COVID impacted $75 ticket. $75 is not what it cost us to put this conference on. The cost is much more than that. And so we just wanted to provide a sliding scale price option for people. So that's why there's multiple levels for the virtual ticket, is that we just encourage folks to pay what you can. Charles, Charles says he hears this question for others. Netroots is loyal to the Democratic Party, so it makes no sense to submit panels that are oppositional to the DNC or important Democrats. I also don't quite agree, Charles. Yeah, I mean, Netroots is not the Democratic Party. We are obviously a progressive conference and a progressive community. And so, but that community includes people who are very engaged in the DNC and the Democratic Party. It includes people who are, socialist and, much more radical. And so we invite the beauty, I think, of Netroots is that it brings people from all of these different perspectives together, and they push each other, and the conversations get really lively. And so whether or not if you serve on your county committee and you love the Democratic Party and are very engaged, that's great. If you are pushing on the more radical side, that's great too. We encourage all of those debates, and often in a panel, like if we have a panel on healthcare, often we will have panelists who have that range too, folks who are working on what's politically possible, and folks who are working on pushing the boundaries and pushing the conversation forward. So Allie asks, if your panel is not selected for a live panel, would you be considered for virtual, and vice versa? We're right now, we're sort of seeing an equal number for in-person or virtual. If you don't necessarily get selected for one, that doesn't mean you automatically get the other. But we will try to select panels based on, if you are submitting an idea and you say you can only, do virtual, then we will try to honor that and get you in a slot. The thing that might be a little bit tricky is that, for example, if we get 20 great immigration panels, but they're all for virtual presentation, we would not be able to select all 20 of them. We would want to also make sure that we're having at least a couple of conversations in person about that topic too. And so I'm guessing there may be a little give and take there. If one of your panelists can't be there in DC, and so you put that your panel is virtual, we might come back and say, hey, would you consider swapping that panelist out so that we can do it fully in person? So answer that question to the best of your ability about whether it's for in-person or virtual. And we're hoping that the numbers kind of balance out. We're seeing that so far, but I guess time will tell if that remains the case. Any other questions? Just seeing if I see any other questions that I've missed. Are previous session schedules and panelist info available online right now? Yes. If you go to our website, and at the top you'll see agenda. We do still have last year's content live if you want to flip through there. If you go to that same menu and hover, you'll see a drop down for panels and trainings, and you can actually go see some of this, the topics from last year as well. So that is still live. We won't keep it live forever, but we did want to keep it live a little bit longer so that folks could see what types of sessions. And then also, like, if you just really like have an idea, but you're just not sure if it's a good fit, feel free to email me. I'm happy to give you feedback. You know, I'm happy to give, you know, a quick critique and just say, oh, I think this is actually really well suited to our conference and our attendees, or, hey, you might want to consider framing it this way. So I would love to give you that feedback. You can email me directly at mary@netrootsnation.org, or email we have a panels email that a couple of us on staff check. It's just panels@netrootsnation.org. Marcella is asking the link to the application, so I'm going to throw that into the chat or into the Q&A. I can spell. It's netrootsnation.org/proposals. If you go to our web, if you go to just netrootsnation.org, at the top you'll see session proposals as well. But I did throw that in the chat. Any other questions? I'm just looking in the Q&A and in the chat to see if I missed anybody. I don't see any that I missed, but oh, the link to the previous panelists. Yes, let me just grab that. Okay, I'm dropping into chat right now the link to last year's sessions so that you can see what that looked like last year. And then I'm going to throw in here one more session as well, or one more link as well for our overview schedule, so that you can kind of see what the schedule is going to look like for this year's event. I can go over that really quickly too, if that would be helpful. We, in the mornings this year, because we're now having to program across time zones, in the mornings we're going to do from about 9 to 11, 2 hour long training sessions that are more like professional development oriented. Those will not be live streamed because of time zones, and because we'll need to do some editing because they're a little longer. But those will be edited and put into the app for folks who are attending virtually to be able to access as well. Then we have each day around noon, we'll have a break where folks can grab lunch. We'll do some lunchtime programming. One or two of those days will probably be a keynote type panel or a higher profile session that would be live streamed, of course. And I think one of the days it's probably going to end up being a networking type event. So obviously that wouldn't be streamed because it's a more in-person thing. But the sort of dual programming starts around 1 till about 6. There'll be 3 time slots for panels. They're hour long with a break, 15 to 30 minute break in between each. And then our keynotes at the end of each day. Is there a minimum time for training? So all panels and all trainings that are going through this process are 60 minutes. Some of the trainings will also be offered in the morning as longer ones, but those we're kind of thinking through as a staff, thinking through topically what those will look like. So what might happen, Josh, if you submit a training and we're like, man, that would make a really great extended 2 hour long training. We may just come back to you and say, hey, we actually think this would be a great offering for our professional development morning trainings. Would you be able to, make this into a 2 hour training? Or, in your proposal, you're proposing, email best practices, and we'd like to pair that with someone who, who works on, writing and design or something like that. So we may pair things up. But yeah, if for all panels and trainings are 60 minutes. And then, you know, we may come back to you and say, hey, we want to do this a little bit longer, but we're still mulling, and we're doing some polling with different members of the community to sort of see what skills it is that people most are looking for right now, because we want to make sure that those morning sessions are very useful to folks, and are sort of the most needed skill sessions. Any more questions? Okay, Will, the remote and in-person events will feature the same content. Yes. The only difference is that the professional development trainings that are happening in the morning in DC will be happening live. They will be recorded, edited, and then put into the app later. So people who are attending virtually, because they're happening so early in the morning in DC on East Coast time, we're not going to be live streaming those. Those will be edited and put into the app. But as far as regular panels and training sessions, at any given time slot, we'll have half of them happening virtually, half of them happening in DC, and then it'll look slightly different in how you're accessing them. So if you're in person, you will either go into a room and watch a panel that's happening, or you can go to a quiet space or go to your hotel room or your office or wherever, and you can watch a session that's happening virtually. And then for folks who are attending virtually, they'll click into a session, and it will either be a live stream or it will be a webinar type experience of how they're viewing. The only content that's going to be unique is that there will be some social events happening on site, networking type events, some of the evening like social events. We won't be streaming those because we can't really stream a social event very well. If we end up doing any film screenings, we would probably have those virtual as well. But generally for panels and trainings, yes, people will be able to access them both in person and virtually. So. Any other questions? I'm just going through the chat really quick to make sure I didn't miss anybody. And I don't see any that I didn't address. If you were not able to ask a question, please feel free to email me either at mary@netrootsnation.org or panels@netrootsnation.org. If you want to run an idea before submitting it, you can also do that. Just email me at either one of those emails and I'll keep an eye on it. We will send this recording out as well to everyone who RSVP'd. So just doing one more check. Okay, someone says, it looked like Every Action sponsored a training last year. We do have a small number of our sessions are sponsored content. So yeah, if you are with an organization and you're interested in doing a sponsored kind of like a demo type session, just email me and I can get you that information. But we do have a few sponsored trainings and panels. We don't do a ton of them, but we do occasionally. Last chance, any more questions? Okay, I think I got everyone. I appreciate each of you coming. If you have questions, follow up. I look forward to seeing you all either in DC or virtually. And I hope that you all have a lovely rest of your afternoon. Bye.